Practice 8. Exercise 1. Dr. Williams, this is Karen Clinton from the Daily News. I'd like to ask you some questions about the new official standard weight that you purchased.
I'd be happy to help you. What would you like to know?
First of all, how was the standard weight used?
Well, the people in our department use it to check the sales all over the country. The Department of Weights and Measures, we are a government agency. It's our responsibility to see that all the scales measure a kilogram accurately. So this is the way we used to adjust the scales.
How did you check the scales before?
We have an old standard weight that we used to use. It had to be replaced because it was imprecise. You see, it was made of poor quality metal that was too porous. It absorbed too much moisture.
Oh, so when the weather was humid, it weighed more, and when it was dry, it weighed less.
Exactly. And that variation can affect the standards of the whole country. So, our department had the new weight made out of higher quality metal.
How much did it cost?
About $45,000.
$45,000 for a 1 kilogram weight? That's more expensive than gold. Is it really worth that much?
I'm sure it is. Industries depend on our government agency to monitor the accuracy of scales, so that when they buy and sell their products, there's one standard. Think of the drug industry, for example. Those companies rely on high accuracy scales to manufacture and package medicine.
1. What is the conversation mainly about? Two. How was the weight used? Three. Why was it necessary to replace the old standard weight? Four. What does Dr. Williams probably think about the cost of the new weight? Exercise 2. Lisa Anderson speaking.
Dr. Anderson, my name is Ben White. My roommate, Jack Wood, is in your art history class. Art history 502?
Yes.
Well, he is sick and won't be in your class today. He asked me to bring his term paper to your office.
Okay, the paper is due by 3 o'clock.
I have a class from 1 to 2. I'll bring it to your office after my class.
Well, I have a meeting this afternoon, so you can drop it off with the secretary of the art history department. She'll see that I get it.
Okay. Oh, I almost forgot. I'm a biology major. But my advisor told me that I need one more humanities course to graduate. I've noticed that you are teaching a course on landscape painters next semester. Could you tell me a little bit about it?
Sure. Well, it's a course for non-art majors. We'll be looking at several different painters and examining their works. We'll also look at the history and politics of the era in which they lived.
That sounds interesting. What else is required?
There is no final exam, and there is only one required book, but each student has to give a major presentation about the individual painter at the end of the course.
It sounds good. Will you be in your office later today? I'd like to talk to you some more.
Well, my meeting's scheduled to last all afternoon. Why don't you stop by tomorrow? Any time in the afternoon. My office is in the Fine Arts building right next to the library.
Thanks, I'll do that.
1. What does the man call the woman? 2. What does the man almost forget to do? 3. What will the students be required to do in the course the woman describes? 4. What does the woman suggest the man do? Exercise 3. As you probably know, log structures are gaining popularity. They are no longer just the simple country homes that we think of as the traditional log cabin. Some upscale homes now incorporate natural round logs in ceiling beams and walls. People seem to think that the rounded logs give their homes a cozy, warm atmosphere. And even people who want to build a traditional log cabin on their own can buy a kit with pre-cut logs that fit together like pieces of jigsaw puzzle. Before showing you some slides of modern log houses, I'd like to give you a little historical background on the subject. Log cabins were first built in the late 1600s along the Delaware River Valley. The European immigrants who settled there brought centuries-old traditions of working with logs, and in this heavily wooded area, logs were the material in hand. Log cabins were the most popular in the early 1800s with the settlers who were moving west. They provided the answer to the pioneers' need for a sail and sliding boards for windows. But the log buildings that have probably had most influence on modern architects are those of the mountain retreats of wealthy New Yorkers. These country houses, which were popular in the early 1900s, typify what's known as the Adirondack style. Now let's look at those slides. 1. What is the speaker mainly discussing? 2. According to the speaker, what gives modern log homes their warm atmosphere? 3. Why did the early settlers use logs for building homes? 4. According to the speaker, why were log cabins especially popular with settlers who moved west? Exercise 4. The Old Canada Road is a long lost trail between the Canadian province of Quebec and Maine in the northeast corner of the United States. Yes, it really was lost, and finding it again was a complex process that involved state-of-the-art technology. How the location of the roads was pinpointed was very interesting, and I'll return to it as soon as I give you a little background information. The road was begun in 1817, a few years before Maine even became a state. At the time, Quebec was a major market for livestock, crops and fish, so a road to Quebec was seen by officials in Maine as necessary for trade. For about 20 years, the movement of people and goods was mostly from Maine to Quebec, and then the trend reversed as thousands of Canadians immigrated to Maine to escape poor crops, the lack of jobs, and the threat of disease. I think it was a colour epidemic. Besides its negative reasons, major building projects in Maine also made the state very attractive for the Canadians who needed work. I should stress, though, that immigration during that period went in both directions. In fact, the flow of people and goods went completely unhindered. There wasn't even a border post until around 1850. The people of the time saw Maine and Quebec as a single region, mainly because of the strong French influence which is still evident in Maine today. Eventually, the road fell into disuse as a major railway was completed. Finally, people simply forgot about it, and that's how it came to be lost. This brings me back to the original topic. I think it was a colour epidemic. Besides its negative reasons, major building projects in Maine also made the state very attractive for the Canadians who needed work. I should stress, though, that immigration during that period went in both directions. In fact, the flow of people and goods went completely unhindered. There wasn't even a border post until around 1850. The people of the time saw Maine and Quebec as a single region, mainly because of the strong French influence which is still evident in Maine today. Eventually, the road fell into disuse as a major railway was completed. Finally, people simply forgot about it, and that's how it came to be lost. This brings me back to the original topic. One. What is one reason Canadians began to immigrate to Maine during the 1800s? Two. What can be inferred about the region including Maine and Quebec during the early 1800s? Three. What subject is the speaker most likely to discuss next? Exercise 5. Okay, in the last class we talked about the classification of trees and we ended up with the basic description of angiosperm. You remember that those are plants with true flowers and seeds that develop into fruits. The common broad-leaf trees we have on campus fall into this category. But our pines don't. Now I hope you all followed my advice and wore comfortable shoes, because as I said today, we are going to do a little field study. To get started, let me describe a couple of broadleaf trees we have in front of us. I'm sure you've all noticed that this big tree next to Brett Hall. It's a black walnut that must be 80 feet tall. As a matter of fact, there is a plaque identifying. It is the tallest black walnut in the state, and from here we can see the beautiful archway of trees at the Commons. They are American elms. The ones along the Commons were planted when the college was founded 120 years ago. They have distinctive dark green leaves that look lopsided because the two sides of the leaf are unequal. I want you to notice the elm right outside the Jackson Hall. Some of the leaves have withered and turned yellow, maybe due to Dutch elm disease. Only a few branches seem effective so far, but if this tree is sick, it'll have to be cut down. Well, let's move on and I'll describe what we see as we go. 1. What are the students going to do during this class period? 2. In what class is this lecture probably being given? 3. What is remarkable about the black walnut tree outside Brett Hall? 4. What is the problem with the elm tree near Jackson Hall? 6.
Hey Sarah, Did you get that letter about the new options for food service next year?
Not yet. Are there a lot of changes?
There sure are. Instead of paying one fee to cover all meals for the whole school year, we will now be able to choose by 7, 10, 14, or 21 meals per week. They give you a card with the number of meals you get for a week marked on it.
That's a big change, Eric, and a complicated system.
Yeah, but it will be much better for people who don't eat 3 meals a day, 7 days a week in the cafeteria, because they don't have to pay meals they don't eat.
So what's the deal for those who do eat at school all the time?
It's better for them too, because the meal you contract, the cheaper each one is.
I see. It still sounds rather complicated.
True. It took me several hours to figure it out. I decided to go with the 10 meals.
Why's that?
Well, I never eat breakfast and I often go away on weekends. So, the 10 meal plan gives me lunch and dinner each weekday at a fairly low price. And I won't be paying for meals I don't usually eat.
And what about the weekend when you are on campus?
Well, there are often guests on campus at weekends. So they allow you to buy single meals on a walk-in basis on Saturdays and Sundays. The price per meal is much higher in that way. But I'm away so much that it will still be less money for me to pay single prices on the weekends rather than sign up for the 14 meal a week plan.
Oh, I guess I'll have to sit down and figure out my eating pattern so I can get the best deal. 1. What's the main feature of the new method of paying for meals? Two. When do the students pay for the meals they contract for? 3. How does the new plan benefit the students who eat all their meals at the school cafeteria? 4. How can weekend guests eat at the cafeteria? Exercise 7. I was really glad when your club invited me to share my coin collection. It's been my passion since I collected my first Lincoln dime in 1971. That is the current coin with Abraham's image. Just a little history before I started my own collection. Lincoln pennies are made of copper, and they were the first United States coin to bear the likeness of the President. It was minted in 1909 when the country was celebrating the centennial of Lincoln's birth. Then, in 1809, the decision was made to redesign the 1-cent coin in his honor. Before that, the penny has an American Indian head on it. The new penny was designed by artist Victor David Brainer. It is interesting because he put his initials, DVB, on the reverse of the coin and the original design. There was a general abort when the initial was discovered, and only a limited number of the coins were strutted with the initials on them. Today a penny with the initials from a San Francisco mint called the 1909's DVB was worth $500. Now when I started my coin collection, I began with a penny for several reasons. There were a lot of them, several 100 billion were minted, and there are a lot of people collecting them. So I have plenty of people to trade with and talk to about my collection. Also, it was the coin I could afford to collect as a young teenager. In the 25 years since then, I have managed to acquire over 300 coins. Some of them are very rare. I will be sharing with you today some of my rare specimens, including the 1909's DVB. 1. Why does the woman collect coins? 2. Why were the letters DVB on the pennies? 3. What was one of the reasons the collector collected coins as a teenager? 4. What will the speaker do next? Exercise 8. Today I want to talk to you about the wasps and their nests. You recall the biologists divided species of wasps into two groups, solitary and social. Solitary wasps, as the name implies, do not live together with other wasps. In most species, the male and female get together only to mate, and then the female does all the work of building the nest and providing the food for the offspring by herself. Solitary wasps usually make their nest on the ground, and they separate the chambers for the individual offspring with grass, stone or mud, whatever is handy. What are social wasps? They form a community and work together to build and maintain the nest. A nest begins in the spring when the fertile female, called the queen, builds the first new compartment in the nest and lays eggs. The first offspring are females, but cannot lay eggs. These females are called workers. They build a lot of new compartments and the queen lays more eggs. They also care for the new offspring and defend the nest with their stingers. By the way, only the females have stingers. Most social wasps make a nest of paper. The female produces the paper by chewing out fibers or old wood. They spread the papers in thin layers to make cells, which the queen lays her eggs in. Most of you, I'm sure, have seen these nests suspended from the trees. They may also be built on the ground in abundant road bowls. 1. Who builds the nest of solitary wasps? 2. Why are female wasps more dangerous to people than male wasps? 3. What is the main function of the queen? 4. What are the nests of social wasps made of? Exercise 9. What was the most popular mix about the United States in the 19th century? Was that of the free and simple life of the farmer. It was said that the farmers worked hard on their own land to produce whatever their families needed. They might sometimes trade with their neighbors, but in general they could get along just fine by relying on themselves, not on commercial ties with others. This is how Thomas Jefferson idealized the farmers at the beginning of the 19th century. And at that time, this may have been close to the truth, especially on the frontier. But by the mid-century, sweeping changes in agriculture were well underway, as farmers began to specialize in the raising of crops such as cotton, corn or wheat. By late in the century, revolutionary inventions in farm machinery has vastly increased the production of specialized crops, and an extensive network of railroads had linked farmers throughout the country to the market in the East and even overseas. By raising and selling specialized crops, farmers could afford more and finer goods and achieved a much higher standard of living, but at a price. Now farmers are no longer dependent just on the weather and their own efforts. Their lives were increasingly controlled by the banks, which had power to grant or deny loans for new machinery, and by the railroads, which set the rates for shipping their crops to the market. As businessmen, farmers now had to worry about national economic depression and the implementation of world supply and demand on, for example, the price of wheat. And so by the end of the 19th century, the era of Thomas Jefferson's independent farmer had come to a close. 1. What is the main topic of the talk? Two. According to the professor, what was the major change in agriculture during the 19th century? 3. According to the professor, what was one result of the increased use of machinery on farms in the United States? 4. According to the professor, why was the world market important for the United States agriculture?